Please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Joint ROTC Color Guard and our national anthem by Iowa State ROTC cadets Tanner Manning and Kevin Schofelt.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order, arms. Center, face. Prepare to vote. Ready, pose. Ready, turn.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Winfrey. I currently serve as the Memorial Union Director. In 1928, the doors of the Memorial Union opened as a living memorial for those who selflessly protect the freedoms of our country. The Gold Star Hall ceremony is our opportunity to celebrate the lives of the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Today, we come together to hear the stories of 4 Iowa State students who answered the call to serve our country and remember the impact of these incredible members of the Iowa State family. A tradition within the military that builds a sense of belonging is to present a coin, which signifies a person's connection to an organization. Iowa State University has designed a coin to honor this tradition and to help foster new connections. On one side of our coin is the gold star, and the words, "For thee they died," reminding us of the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. The other side reads, Iowa State University, and the motto, "Learning to return services to those who served us." We'll have a coin available for viewing in the Gold Star Hall following the ceremony. After the narratives about each of our honorees are read, the Assistant Director of the Veterans Center, Fred Lloyd, will give each family a coin to keep. It is meant to demonstrate our commitment and to serve as a reminder that these honorees are always a part of us. And we will continue to remember and respect each person whose name is inscribed on the walls of the Gold Star Hall. And now we will hear videotaped remarks from Iowa State President Wendy Winterstein.
Hello, I'm Wendy Winterstein, President of Iowa State University. On behalf of the Iowa State community, I'm honored to welcome you to the annual Gold Star Hall ceremony. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I would like to take this opportunity to share my deep gratitude and admiration for our veterans and members of the armed forces. I also want to recognize the family and friends of our military members who provide invaluable support and love. Today we honor 4 individuals, members of the Iowa State family, who bravely made the ultimate sacrifice. John Fuller was a captain for the U.S. Army Airborne. Meredith Winter was a private first class in the Marines. Kenneth Tapscott was a lieutenant in the Navy, and Skylar Wheeler was a sergeant in the Army. These young men and all of the individuals whose names are etched on the walls of Gold Star Hall deserve our deepest respect and appreciation. These men made significant contributions that have shaped our country and protected our freedoms. We often hear that freedom is not free, and it is at times such as this that we should pause and reflect on that sobering yet important truth. We offer our deepest sympathy to the family and friends of the servicemen we are recognizing today. We take heart in knowing that their cyclone spirit will endure forever. We are profoundly grateful to all members of the Iowa State family who have answered the call to serve. Thank you for your service and sacrifice.
Next, we'll hear from Lieutenant Colonel Michael Hansen of the United States Air Force and Iowa State's ROTC program.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I stand here today to express my gratitude as a former student of Iowa State and 18-year veteran of active duty service in the United States Air Force. Though I've returned to my roots, I realize that I look through things through a different lens, perhaps a little more educated in the ways of the world, perhaps a little more seasoned. I have the honor to be here on Veterans Day and the privilege to share my thoughts and feelings. It's an honor that many, far too many, were never afforded. I've spent the last 6 years living in the Netherlands. About 7 miles down the road from where I lived is a town called Margraten. It's a very small town with a very big cemetery, the Netherlands American Cemetery. There, amidst marble white crosses and stars of David, rest 8,301 World War II soldiers. There, 1,722 names are chiseled into the wall of the missing. Some of those names are immortalized right here in our very own Gold Star Hall. If you've ever been to a place like Margraten, it's a peculiar mix of beauty and melancholy. During my 6 years living nearby its sacred ground, so many people took the time to come to me and tell me about their experiences with the military. They told me their own stories, and they told me, too, about American heroes who passed through and liberated their villages. On more than one occasion, they would ask, and it was a question that resonated with me, why would American soldiers, then or now, come all the way over here just to help us? It really kind of struck me as odd, something I really never took the time to think about. My intuitive answer was always, well, why wouldn't they? It never really dawned on me that we had a choice. I realized that to this day, those Dutch people have a deep appreciation for what our young women and men, like those we're here to recognize today, did for them 75 years ago. Their gratitude is humbling. In fact, there's a long waiting list of Dutch people waiting to adopt the grave of a soldier immortalized in Margraten. For them, it's a sense of pride and thankfulness to take care of, learn about, and maybe even connect with the family of their fallen soldier. Upon returning to Iowa, a state that has no active duty or significant military presence, I'm reminded of how lucky we are to receive the support we do from the communities we live in. Iowans appreciate the military, but like people everywhere, unless they've served, have family members who have served, or are serving, they may not understand the military. Looking to the future, it's important that we don't forget one of America's greatest untapped human resources, our student veterans. Allison Lighthall, a military behavioral health professional, observed, "They are emotionally mature, goal-oriented, mission-driven, experienced leaders. They work tirelessly to achieve their objectives and look for ways to make meaningful connections and contributions. They are self-sufficient. They only ask questions when they cannot find the answer themselves. They not only understand the concept of sacrifice for the greater good, they've lived it. They are respectful. They think globally and bypass things that are trivial or trendy." Student veterans are the kind of role models we need on our campuses. We owe them our gratitude, but more importantly, we owe them the chance to have meaningful new careers and fulfilling civilian lives from which all will benefit. Iowa State veterans have made our university proud. The four men we honor today from 2 wars help us understand the why of courage and service. I can't tell you why they chose to serve. They might have felt it was their responsibility. They might have felt that there was no other option. Each of our veterans had their own why. Although each of these students chose to serve for different reasons, their dedication to our country was the same. And through their stories, we honor their memory. We can never forget. On this Veterans Day and in the days to come, ask a veteran about their service. Ask them what it means to serve. You may hear a story that makes you think about patriotism, loyalty, and sacrifice in a way that you've never thought about it before. And today and every day, if you are a veteran, share your story. But most importantly, tell the stories of your comrades who are no longer able to speak for themselves. In the words of President John F. Kennedy, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Will Reinig up to speak. Will is a veteran and an Iowa State student.
I suppose you could call me a veteran. I do possess typical qualifications. I served in the Army Reserve for 8 years. I occasionally park in the Hero Space in the Hy-Vee parking lot. I did a combat tour in Afghanistan as a combat engineer, and perhaps most important of all, I'll even be getting a free meal at Applebee's tonight. With the price does come the perks. But it's not the price or the perks that make you feel like a veteran. It's something more nebulous, something that belongs to each of us individually, something that brings all of us here today. That something is memory. What we've seen, what we've done, and sometimes who we'll never see again. Such memories can define a person's existence. They can function as a divider for the life before and the life after. And they can be the source of both the greatest blessing and the heaviest burden. All of which have been true in my own personal experience. Now, despite the towering specimen of humanity that stands before you today, I once was not so lucky. During my deployment 6 long years ago, I resembled a vaguely human-shaped collection of chopsticks, with a set of glasses so distinctively ugly that it looked to all the world like I was determined to bring Dungeons and Dragons to Afghanistan. But all it took to bisect my existence into a life before and a life after was the uttering of a phrase that no combat engineer ever wants to hear. Catastrophic kill, catastrophic kill, catastrophic kill. A phrase so succinct and direct that in the cadence of its repetition can be heard the falling of a hammer. Mercifully, I only had to hear it once, but all it took was once. The silence after those words crackled over the headset was not deafening. It was enveloping. It swallowed me up. It choked the breath out of my lungs. It made my hands fall slack. And then the training took over. I shouldered my radio, I grabbed my rifle, and I followed my LT out and into the billowing cloud of smoke and flame. I didn't know what I would find on the other side of that dusty veil, but I did know that those were our roads, and they would be cleared. You're not ready to share something like that when you come home. Honestly, you're not even really thinking about it. You just want to come home. You lie without really understanding how big of a lie that you're telling. But you find out. As the months go by, you realize how they're different, how you're different. Family and friends, they all see it, even and especially if you don't. It was by way of emotional outbursts and constantly tense muscles that I hinted at my experiences. And as is all too often, it is those who we love most that bear the brunt of our anguish and lack of understanding. It was my grandmother that slowly unfurled the tightly wound tapestry of my memory, and she was heartbroken by what she saw. Being a devoutly religious woman who often looked to God for answers, she suggested that I do as she had once done when she was plagued by painful recollections herself. She suggested that I pray for a healing of memories. She suggested that I ask God to help me forget. And she was altogether taken aback by what I had to say. Never. Never. I will never, ever forget. I will allow the memories of everything else in my life to fall away before I relinquish that hold on the memories of my fallen brothers. That I should live when such men died burdened me with both the honor and the responsibility to remember them. Their names, their faces, their sacrifices are carved onto the stone edifice of my memory in much the same way that other names are chiseled into the solemn hall that we celebrate in this gathering. We are each a living repository filled with the knowledge of those who have fallen, and we will not shirk from our responsibility to share that knowledge today or in any of the days yet to come. I imagine that most of us, if not all of us, hold on to at least one person, one face, or even just a name. A name that we may have whispered to ourselves in a private prayer, or maybe a name that we murmured into the dregs of an empty bottle. I ask that if any of you have the memory of a fallen veteran preserved within the annals of your mind, that, if you are able, to stand with me now. I ask you to pull that recollection, no matter how small, to the very front of your mind. And I ask you to remember. To remember that they watered the tree of liberty with their sacrifice. To remember that they stood on death ground and they fought. And to remember that at the very end, they shed their blood with us and became our brothers. Thank you.
Today, we will share remembrances of 4 brave Iowa State students who gave their lives for this country. Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Paul will speak about John Fuller. Retired Navy Captain Paul Follini will speak about Skylar Wheeler. Retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Daniel P. Devine will speak about Meredith Winter. Retired Navy Commander Daniel A. Burr will speak about Kenneth Tapscott. Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Paul will start us off.
The Gold Star Hall at Iowa State University contains many extraordinary brave men and women who gave the ultimate sacrifice in service to the United States. But it is rare to have a member who took part in 2 historic battles during the Second World War. Captain John M. Jack Fuller was part of the D-Day operation and helped hold the Allied line during the Battle of the Bulge. This year marks the 75th anniversary of these 2 momentous battles that played a key role in helping the Allies defeat Germany to end the war in Europe. Jack Fuller was born on 19 August 2019 in Milford, Iowa. He joined the Boy Scouts when he was 12 years old and remained a scout 3 years until he left in 1934. He achieved the rank of Life Scout, but fell short of his dream to obtain the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest and most difficult rank a Boy Scout can reach, with only 4% having ever reached that honor. When Jack arrived in Ames to major in general engineering at Iowa State, he participated in various activities that revealed his numerous talents and skills. He joined the Delta Upsilon fraternity. He was a member of the band, and he was a leading editor of Iowa State's annual yearbook, The Bomb. He graduated in 1941 and accepted a position with Aluminum Company of America in Cleveland, Ohio. Jack had just started his life after college when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps on 15 January 1942 and spent a little over a year training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In May of 1943, Fuller was promoted to captain, and he was deployed to England in August as a member of the 2nd Battalion, 321 Regiment, 82nd Division, also known as the Screaming Eagle Battalion. By 1943, the Allies had scored key victories against Axis powers in Europe. The Soviet Union defeated Germany at Stalingrad in February. By May, all of northern Africa was liberated, and Italy surrendered in September. However, the Germans were still fighting a one-front war on the European continent, and Fuller would find himself as a part of the assault on German forces in France in 1944 that aimed to open up a second front. In the early morning hours of 6 June 1944, D-Day, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions set flight towards France. The plans called for the 6,600 paratroopers to land behind enemy lines to establish a beachhead from which they would capture Cherbourg, France, in preparation for an amphibious assault to follow near dawn. Anti-aircraft artillery was intense and forced flight formations out of their original paths, which resulted in dispersed drops that forced mixed bands of troops to attempt to continue the mission. Despite this, the Screaming Eagles took Cherbourg and played a crucial role in ensuring success for the 160,000 Allied troops that landed along a 50-mile stretch of heavily fortified French coastline that day. The valiant actions of men like Captain Fuller affirmed General Dwight D. Eisenhower's comment about D-Day when he declared, and I quote, "We will accept nothing less than full victory," end quote. Fuller's 82nd Airborne Division continued playing a significant part in the Allied advance in the West. On 17 September 1944, they participated in a daylight jump into Holland that secured a vital supply route for British Second Army. By the final month of 1944, the German army appeared to be near defeat. News stories about the war began focusing on the aftermath. The general mood was an Allied victory was not far off. That changed on 18 December 1944. Germany launched a counteroffensive against Allied forces in the West, attempting to drive a wedge in the Allied line. American and British forces began retreating, and once again Fuller's division was asked to help stop the enemy advance. During the Battle of the Bulge, the Screaming Eagles were surrounded by 8 German divisions and were bombarded with artillery. Supplies ran so low for the American troops that they were limited to 10 rounds a day. Despite this, the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions stalled the German attack. However, 6 days into the counteroffensive, on 23 December, Captain John Fuller was killed near Bastogne, Belgium. He was temporarily buried in Europe, but returned to a permanent resting place in Fairview Cemetery in Cedar Falls on 5 February 1949. Captain Fuller also became the first American to receive a prestigious honor. The Boy Scouts posthumously awarded him the rank of Eagle Scout in January of 1945. Captain John Fuller played a key part in the Allied victory in Europe. From D-Day to his ultimate sacrifice at the Battle of Bulge, Fuller and numerous other brave men and women from the United States risked so much to help preserve the freedom and liberty for the world. 75 years later, as much as Americans claim to know about these critical battles in war, countless visitors to the World War II Museum still ask, what does the D stand for in D-Day? The answer comes in a letter sent on behalf of Eisenhower in 1964. Brigadier General Robert Schultz, Eisenhower's assistant, wrote, and I quote, "Be advised that any amphibious operation has a departed date. Therefore, the shortened term D-Day is used. The D stands for departed," unquote. And that seems fitting. Unpleasant as wars are, they require precise planning to ensure an optimal outcome. However, even the best plans will not deliver a desired result without courageous individuals like Fuller. When the nation calls, they depart from our homes. When tyranny and oppression spread, they depart from our shores. When evil hopes to triumph, they depart from the safety of their bases to confront danger. But no matter what happens, they do not depart from our hearts. They remain there. And their brave actions live on at the core of the patriotic character that lives in all Americans.
Boone, Iowa is a town with a rich and storied history. It is named after a veteran of the War of 1812, Captain Nathaniel Boone, son of Daniel Boone, and was home to the first Fairway and first Casey's General Store. Boone was also where Schuyler Bertram Wheeler was born to Schuyler and Eva Wheeler on August 11th, 1915. He grew up on a 160-acre farm, and like many of his generation, watched the effects of the Great Depression on his family. Farm prices dropped, forcing many farmers to sell off land, including the Wheeler family. By the time Franklin Roosevelt became president and launched his New Deal in 1933, Schuyler had graduated from high school. Perhaps it was the Great Depression that served as the impetus for Schuyler's pursuit of a college education. He first enrolled in Boone Junior College before entering Iowa State College, majoring in dairy industry. Schuyler arrived on campus as Iowa State was completing construction on a new milking parlor. His dairy industry education paved the way for his first job at a creamery in Boone after graduation in 1941. He eventually moved to Peoria, Illinois, and worked at a creamery there until July 12, 1942, when he joined the Army. Technical Sergeant Wheeler received 2 years of intensive training at Fort Scott, Illinois. After training, his family held a farewell celebration before he deployed to Europe. Schuyler attended the gathering in full uniform, showing that he was proud to be doing his part for his country. He took great pride as a soldier in the Army, and he taught his nephew Keith how to march, salute, and other drills he learned at Fort Scott. The Wheeler family understood the daunting mission that awaited Schuyler and sent him off knowing how proud they were of him and how much they loved him. Sergeant Wheeler left for France on August 1st, 1944, as a member of the 95th Infantry of George Patton's Third Army. 2 months earlier, the Allied forces had landed at Normandy and by late summer pushed further into German-occupied France. Sergeant Wheeler's division was crucial to the Allied offensive in Western Europe. He helped establish the first bridgeheads across the Moselle River, which provided passage into eastern France in preparation for the eventual assault on Germany. On their way, Wheeler's division liberated the fortress city of Metz, France, which was the last major city before the German border. On December 5th, 1944, the 95th Infantry approached the impregnable Siegfried Line. Referred to as the Dragon's Teeth by the Allies, the Siegfried Line was a German defensive line built during the 1930s opposite the French Maginot Line. Fighting intensified at the Siegfried Line, which was expected, but unknown to the Allies were Germany's plans to launch a major counteroffensive. This last major offensive became known as the Battle of the Bulge. The German already hoped to cut the Allied forces in two and prolong the war. On December 15th, 1944, the day before the start of the Battle of the Bulge, Sergeant Wheeler's division established bridgeheads across the Saar River for an assault on German troops in the town of Ensdorf, Germany. As Wheeler entered the city, he was killed by German machine gun fire. After temporary burial in Europe, the body of 29-year-old Schuyler Wheeler was returned to Boone to be laid to rest. Schuyler's brother Waldo was in Belgium, also helping the Allied cause, and after the war, named his son Schuyler to honor his late brother. Technical Sergeant Wheeler died while fighting to defeat fascism and to preserve liberty for the world, along with over 418,000 Americans who gave their lives in the Second World War. We continue to reflect on his and their sacrifice. Words penned by President Abraham Lincoln to a mother who lost her sons in the Civil War are timeless recognition of the sorrow felt by the Wheelers and all who have lost loved ones serving our country. President Lincoln wrote, "I feel how weak and fruitless must be any word of mine which should attempt to beguile you from the grief of a loss so overwhelming. I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom." Would all those here today for Technical Sergeant Schuyler Bertram Wheeler please rise and be recognized.
Imagine for a moment the year is 1940. You're driving west on Highway 30 through Tama County. As you approach a stretch of road south of Dysart, Iowa, you see an athletic young man standing along the side of the road. He is holding a suitcase with his thumb extended, trying to catch a lift. You stop to pick him up and to discover he is on his way to Ames. His name is Meredith D. Roy Winter, and he's a chemistry major at Iowa State College who needs to get back to campus. He tells you that his family drove him to the highway from their home in Dysart so he could try to catch a ride. He is the oldest of 7 children, born to Thomas and Lenora Winter. Once in the vehicle, Meredith may have asked you to call him Merd, as his family affectionately did, or he may have requested that you call him Tim, which was the nickname he acquired from his college buddies. Regardless, along the way you discover more about the young man you were chauffeuring. You ask Meredith how long he lived in Dysart. He tells you pretty much his whole life, with the exception of 4 years when the Winter family moved to New York after their father lost his job as a result of the Great Depression. They tried their luck as dairy farmers before moving back to Dysart after Meredith graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. The drive to Ames from eastern Iowa was long, so you have time to ask Meredith about his childhood. You discovered he loved sports, especially golf, and hated to lose. He also tells you about the time he built a pole vaulting station in his front yard. The bar was set so high that he often hit his head on the ground attempting to clear it and would knock himself unconscious in the process. You find out that his passion for knowledge was instilled in him at a young age from his mom, who was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. As you approach campus, Meredith mentions that he works as a janitor and used to work in a campus cafeteria so he could earn money to pay for college. But his face really lights up when you ask him if he's escorting anyone. He glows with joy when he tells you about the love of his life, Betty Ewing. He met her at Iowa State, and he was so head over heels for her that he asked his sister Helen if he could teach him how to dance so he could impress Betty. He tells you that he plans to marry her someday. After you drop off Meredith at his destination and drive away, you have no idea that you just spent the last few hours in the company of a war hero. You would not realize until later that you had just given a ride to a man who died fighting for America. After he proposed to Betty, he did not marry her. Instead, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in September of 1943. He also turned down a civil service position in Washington, D.C. to serve his country during the Second World War. He surely made his mother proud when he received his Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Iowa State on 18 December 1943. However, he was not present at the ceremony since he was already in San Diego training for service. In fact, all of Meredith's younger brothers served. James joined the Navy in 1939 and survived Pearl Harbor. Paul served in the Army Air Corps. Robert was a drill sergeant at Lackland Air Force Base, and Don was a weatherman in Japan and Korea. The Winter family proudly displayed 4 Blue Star flags in the front window, but later they had to add 1 Gold Star flag for Meredith. On 6 November 1943, Private First Class Meredith Winter was ordered active duty. He arrived in Guam as part of Company G, 2nd Battalion, 21st Marines, 3rd Marine Division. He was tasked with patrolling Japanese forces while stationed there. Although the United States had Japan on the defensive by the fall of 1944, the Japanese still had strategic areas that prevented B-29 bombers from completing their bombing missions over mainland Japan. American bombers kept getting intercepted by Japanese fighters taking off from Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima had to be captured so the United States could continue operations to defeat the Japanese. On February 1945, after 2 months of naval bombardment, approximately 70,000 Marines led the invasion of Iwo Jima. On 21 February 1945, the 3rd Marine Division landed on Yellow Beach, where PFC Winter participated in combat operations. On 26 February, Winter penned a letter to Betty. He had just turned 26, and he wanted to let his fiancée know that he was still in one piece. He went on. It's been really rough the last few days, to be truthful. I feel 56 instead of 26. He also had a request for Betty. Drop the folks a card and tell them where I am and that I'm all right, will you please? He closed the letter with, I think I'll say goodbye for now. This was the last letter PFC Winter would send. 2 days later, while involved in heavy fighting, a Japanese mortar killed him and 5 other Marines. Fighting remained fierce until the island was declared secure on 16 March of 1945. The Battle of Iwo Jima was one of the bloodiest in Marine Corps history, claiming 7,000 lives. Meredith Winter's ultimate sacrifice in the mission to take Iwo Jima helped save the lives of an estimated 24,000 airmen. The island served as an emergency landing strip for over 2,000 B-29 bombers, whose mission was critical to bring in the war in the Pacific to an end. PFC Meredith Winter was initially buried in the 3rd Marine Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima. On 5 May 1948, Meredith hitched his last ride home. His body was returned to Dysart for permanent burial. Would all those who are here today for Meredith D. Roy Winter please rise and be recognized.
I just wanted to say real quick what an honor it's been so far to meet the family of these service members. And although I'm going to read you a story, the actual service and who these humans are that we're reading about, there's so much more. And just the part of the history that I didn't have as I was talking to the family, it means so much to me. And so here we go. Kenneth Walker Tapscott, Navy Lieutenant, Vietnam. When an ROTC officer makes a phone call to the parents of a midshipman, the reason for the call could be numerous. Was the young man promoted? Did he receive an honor? Did he rank in the top of his class in a recent test of physical or mental aptitude? Or did he earn the ire of his commanding officer because he decided to place a live turtle on his hat during an official ROTC ceremony? That was the reason for the phone call to the parents of habitual prankster Kenneth Walker Tapscott, a member of Iowa State University's Naval ROTC. Imagine for a moment the conversation that took place between this officer and Kenneth's father. The officer had to explain how Midshipman Tapscott, in full uniform, stood in perfect formation with a small baby turtle perched on top of his hat. Kenny was always up for a good laugh, and he held no misgivings for his antics, even if it risked being kicked out of the NRTC unit. Born on November 9th, 1945, Kenny came to Iowa State from Charleston, South Carolina, on an ROTC scholarship in 1963. His turtle on the hat gag was not the only hijinks he pulled while on campus. One time, during an NROTC combat training that required large pools of water to run mock battles with model ships, the entire ROTC arrived to find the pools filled with goldfish, compliments of Kenny. And one night, he decided his nocturnal companion, a pet raccoon, should get to know some of the sorority girls. He carried that raccoon to the back door of a sorority house and let her go, which caused many of the female co-eds to flee, screaming into the night. Kenny's whimsical nature was always a part of him, and so was his profound pride in America and his love for family and friends. When he was a boy, Kenny joined the Boy Scouts and later became an Eagle Scout, demonstrating that he understood the importance of sound discipline and developing his leadership skills. Due to his fun-loving nature, Kenny had so many friends growing up that he never had to drive anywhere. His buddies were always offering to give him a lift, so he focused on pursuing his pilot's license instead, which he earned even before he got his driver's license. There was a certain level of ambition combined with brilliance that Kenny exhibited when he was learning how to fly, and obtaining his pilot's license helped him to explore that potential. He was able to continue that journey of learning and growing at Iowa State University when he accepted an ROTC scholarship. Of all the stories and escapades Kenny compiled during his time in Ames, his favorite one most likely took place in his final year on campus. One day, right here, while in the Memorial Union cafeteria, Kenny witnessed a theft, and a young woman named Jan Boyle was the one who stole his heart. Kenny and Jan started dating, and they grew closer over the course of that final semester, and they got married after graduation on June 1st, 1968. Jan learned that despite being a political science major, Kenny really wanted to be a pediatrician because he loved working with children so much. When he found out that Jan was pregnant, he glowed with excitement and insisted the two of them go shopping for baby clothes right away. Kenny loved the thought of being a father. In 1970, the United States was still fighting a war in Vietnam, and the sight of anti-war protesters upset Kenny. He believed his country could use him, and he volunteered to fight in the war. Lieutenant Tapscott started his tour on June 3rd, 1970, as a member of the Riverine Squadron, as a Naval Intelligence Liaison Officer, or NILO. He participated in the counteroffensive launched by American and South Vietnamese forces in July of 1970. The South Vietnamese Army, backed by U.S. troops, attempted to cut off the line of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that ran through Laos. The counteroffensive coincided with the measured withdrawal of U.S. troops from Vietnam. Just a short 2 months after he arrived in Vietnam on August 6, 1970, Lieutenant Tapscott was out on a routine patrol near Song Ong Doc in South Vietnam when his unit was ambushed with intense rocket and automatic weapons fire. The three craft made a second run through the contacted area, again receiving heavy barrage. One B-40 rocket struck Lieutenant Tapscott in the chest and shoulder, mortally wounding him. He was one of only 3 Nilos lost during the entire Vietnam War. After the loss of Lieutenant Tapscott, the military quickly reached out and brought his twin brother, Keith, home, who was also bravely serving in this war. The Vietnam War claimed over 58,000 American lives by the time it ended in 1975. The war was a contentious issue that divided our country, but the process of healing after the war was important for everyone. So in 1982, the National Park Service completed construction of the Vietnam War Memorial to aid in healing our country. The names of every service member killed in the Vietnam War is engraved on that famous wall. Lieutenant Kenneth Tapscott's name appears on panel 8W, line 89. An estimated 3 million people pass by his name every year as they visit the memorial. Although the Vietnam War Memorial honors the brave men and women who gave their lives for their country, more important are the living memorials of each name inscribed on that wall. The people who knew and loved the men and women whose names cover the wall serve to remind us of their lives. Kenneth's spirit lives on in the memories he created with his sister Rita, his twin brother Keith. It remains in the laughs he shared with Jan, and it lives on in the life of his daughter that he never met, Katie, and his grandchildren, Gage, Peyton, and Ella. Every time someone smiles, remembering one of Kenny's antics, and in every tear shed for him, we are reminded of the happiness and joy he brought to so many people. The day Kenny placed a turtle on his hat as a prank surely aroused laughter among his fellow midshipmen and demonstrated his genuine love for life. Now, as we reflect on his time in the service, we can show appreciation to his family for his dedication to America by bravely fighting to safeguard the ideals of freedom he believed were so important to our country. But all those that are here today, for Lieutenant Kenneth Walker Tapscott, please rise and be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our readers who shared these stories today. Let's remember our honorees with a moment of silence. We will now close our ceremony with the final reading of names. John Fuller, Skylar Wheeler, Meredith Winter, and Kenneth Tapscott. Please rise now, if you're able, for the playing of taps and the retiring of the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to thank the Gold Star Hall Committee for their work to help plan this ceremony. All of the committee members are listed within your programs. Guests are invited to view the names and the displays of our honorees in the Gold Star Hall and join us for a small reception back here in the Great Hall. Thank you for your attendance today.